Let's see. And we can see our test passing. Now, in order to make this a lot more succinct and shorter, we don't want to always have to do this because we're going to be doing this a lot in a lot of places. I'm telling you, it's going to get a lot. So we always want to find ways to make these things shorter. So I'm going to create a different constructor in here. Constant API failure dot from exception. We can say dot from API exception. But nah. Yeah, I'm just gonna do dot from exception, and we're gonna take an API exception. Let me also rename this to API failure with capitals. So we have Harmony. So this is our exception, and with this we can return. We can actually make this a factory constructor, or we can do, but today I'm not teaching about constructors, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this constructor and return this with the message, where the message will be exception.message, and its status code will be exception.statuscode, and that's it. So it's not a constant. Let's go ahead and save that much. So in our repository implementation, we can simply return a left API failure dot from exception. We can pass in the E as the exception. And our test, every time you change something, always rerun your test to make sure that nothing broke. There, our test passed. So now you can pause the video and try to write a test for the get users. Go ahead and pause the video. Alright, so if you were able to do that, then well done. If you weren't able to do that, don't worry. This one's a little bit different because we're returning something, and we're not taking anything here. So let's go ahead and delete this. No, I'm not deleting that. Remember, we always write the test first before the actual implementation. So let's go to the test file. I'm going to close everything. Close tabs to the right. Yes. And then I'm done with this group. I'm going to create a different group. Group get users. I hope that's what it's called. Yes, get users. So the first test, similar to our first test, we can just simply come here and see the first test should call the remote data source create user and complete successfully when the call to remote source is successful. In this case, we're going to do something a little bit different. Should call the remote, what was it? Remote data source get users and return a list of users when call to remote source is successful. I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's it. I officially can't type. So we take this away. There you go. Now we hijack the president. There you go, Mr. President. Remote data sources are president today, and when we get users, remember we're not taking any params, so there's no parameters, so we can go ahead and say .then answers with the invocation that we always almost never need, and it's going to be, I'm sorry, async. What are we returning? We're returning a fake list of users. You can go ahead and create a fake list of users in here with users.empty if you wanted to, user.empty, and create more and more if you wanted to, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just simply going to return an empty list. Remember, the remote data source.get users will return a direct list of user model. So now you can write a test to make sure that this gets called. let's format that. So final results will be equal to await for the repository implementation dot get users, and we want to make sure expect results equals constant write null, not null this time, a write empty list, and we also want to verify that the remote data source dot get users got called, and it got called once, and it didn't get called with anything in its signature. And we also want to verify that there's no more interactions with the remote data source. Ooh, that was a long test. So now let's go ahead and run this test. There will be a few problems with this particular test. So let's start from the first one, unimplemented error. Let's see, go. Come on. Yes, there we go. Unimplemented error. Let's go ahead and implement that. So first of all, we want to make sure that remember, you don't always want to write the full implementation. You want to write as a test. So this time our test is only asking, so you want to write as much as will make your test pass. What is going to make our test pass in this case? The only thing that's going to make our test pass is if we return exactly the list that was returned from the remote data source when there was success. And we also want to test to make sure that it got called with the right data. So we're just basically going to be doing one thing basically. Final result will be equal to await remote data source dot get users, and we return a right results. So tell me, is it going to pass? Fail. So now you can see, what is the problem? The problem is that we're expecting, right, a right list of users, and it returned actually a right empty list as we asked it to. This is the actual problem with lists in Dart. Lists are difficult to equate. They don't have proper equality. They don't have value equality. If I can use that, I think that's what it's called. So in order to actually write these sort of tests in your repository implementation, where you have a return type of a list, whether you put something in here or not, this test is going to fail. Even if we put in the same value in here and there, it's going to fail. In order to test that, what I usually do is, instead of checking if it's equal to an empty list, right, I rather check if the result is A. If it is a right, what is its type? On the right hand side, on the left hand side, it's a failure. You can put in failure, or you can just put in dynamic, like I already taught, yeah? So we want to make sure that it's a right dynamic with what on the right hand side, it's a list of user. Right, so that's it. So this test should pass. Now you might ask, how then do we know if the values of the tests of the list are the same as what was returned? What is the problem this time? Matcher is a right list user. Oh, I forgot to close this. So is a should be invoked. So that's how I usually pass this test. You can see it's passed. Let's go ahead and write the second test, which will be testing when there's a failure. So test. I'm thinking about just copying this over, but where is it? This one. This one should rather be an API failure. So it should return an API failure when the call to remote source is unsuccessful. Let's go ahead and copy that. And then we return that function and we can check to make sure that when remote data source dot get users dot then throw an exception, an API exception. No, we already created one, so T exception, and we can act rather. Final result would be await repository implementation dot get users, and we can finally expect that our result equals a list. Sorry, not a left rather. Server fail, API failure. Dot from exception, T exception. We expect that it has the same message. We verify that remote data source. You can just copy these over. That should solve it. Nice. And we can run that test. And we can see we're back in the red phase. So let's go ahead and implement this and put it in the green phase. So let's go ahead and cut that and try catch. Boom, our test has failed. We're waiting for on API exception, catch the exception, and rather return a left API failure dot from exception with the E as our exception. We can go ahead and run the test again. Nice. So we're done testing and implementing the repository implementation.